Okay, so let's continue. We're now going to start a new chapter. Me'eza revach yesh le'aser. From which profits should a person tithe? This is sort of a continuation of what we had seen before, and we saw yesterday the whole controversy in the poskim, whether you can deduct living expenses or not. Misha notein ma'aser tzarich lahafrish ma'aser mikol revach sheyesh lo. That when you tithe, you should tithe from all your profits, which means maskores, matana, yerusha, kitzvat yeladim. That comes from salary, any gifts, inheritance, and kitzvat yeladim. I'm not even sure what that term kitzvat yeladim, or I think it means an allowance that you receive for maybe child support. I suppose maybe we're talking about if a person is receiving an allowance, what's the word I'm looking for? A stipend for supporting children. Maybe that's also subject to tithes. Afilu, now who says this? That's a very strange thing because, okay, that's from the name of Reb Shlomo Zalman. Afilu revachim shekibel bi isur kegon ribis de oraisa. He says, let's say you have ill-gotten gains. In other words, you received profits from something that you weren't allowed to. Let's say you collected interest on a loan from another Jew. If for whatever reason you're exempt from returning those funds, because normally you'd have to return ill-gotten gains. But let's say the person is moichel and they give you the item, even though you had attained them illegally, you still would have to tithe those things. Or let's say you find lost cash. Okay, you're walking down the street in a non-Jewish area, you find a wad of bills, it doesn't have a siman, and therefore, let's say, as we've learned in Hilchos Hashava Saveda, you'd be allowed to keep it technically, or let's say you've tried to return it and you can't find the owner. Chayev lahafrish mimenu ma'aser, you'd have to tithe that. Even if afterwards you chose of your own volition, let's say you were able to identify the owner and you return the money, but since the halacha awards you the money is yours. And if therefore you decide afterwards you want to give it to the person who lost the money, you would still have to tithe it before giving it back to them, and you'd have to supplement the tithe from your own money. Unless at the very outset your decision was you're not going to keep the money for yourself. In that situation, you would not have to tithe. So essentially what he's saying in this first paragraph is that there don't seem to be that many exemptions from income that you acquire. It's not just your salary, but it's also if you receive a cash gift, if you inherit large sums of money, you would have to tithe that. And again, that would you be able to deduct the inheritance tax, of course, because you have it's only whatever you net would you have to tithe.
Your parents find the money that you inherit the money from them, their estate, and now you're tithing again, and then your kids are going to get it, and then they're going to tithe. So
well, whenever it changes hands, it's subject to new tithing. In other words, I make a salary. The people who pay for my salary have tithed their money, presumably. That doesn't exempt me from tithing, because it's. Once it changes hands, it's now becomes my money. This money vis-a-vis my relationship to it is untithed money. Okay. Ein chiyuv la'aser chal b'sha she'herviach et hakesef ela ka'asher efshar lehanot mimenu b'foal. So the obligation to tithe does not set in once you acquire the funds, but only when you have the ability to benefit from the funds. So, for example, something could be tied up in an account, but if you can't touch the money yet, even though it says that you're the owner of these funds. You don't become subject to tithing them until you can actually use the funds. V'lachein mocher ba'ashrai yafrish ma'aser rak ka'asher mekabel es hakesef. So an example would be, let's say I sell something on credit. Okay, so the guy has committed to pay me $1,000 for this piece of merchandise. Okay, but I haven't received the cash yet. So, or let's say my profit from the sale is going to be $1,000. I don't become subject to tithing until I actually receive the cash, even though it's guaranteed that I'm going to get it. Okay. Yesh mi she'omer shehaminhag hu latet ma'aser rak mirevach shel mamon v'lo mechafatzim v'nadlan shekibel b'matana o b'yerusha. So there is such an opinion that you're only obligated to tithe actual cash. But let's say you receive a gift of objects. What does nadlan mean? I know that abbreviation. I just can't remember it offhand. Just look it up. Real estate. Nechase de lo naidi is what it means. Nechasi de lo naidi is real estate, land. If you inherit land or you receive it as a gift, you're not obligated to tithe. In other words, you don't have to get a valuation of the object that you receive as a gift and give 10% of that to tzedakah. V'yesh misha omer, and that's really the more prevalent minhag. Shelo la'aser mikol nadlan shekibel b'matana o b'yerusha. Aval, he says, and others say, certainly for real estate you don't have to tithe. Aval mechafatzim ma shenohagu shelo la'aser zehu raka asher hu nitzrach lahem. But with chattel, with other objects, let's say someone gives you a car. So if you're going to use the car, so then you don't have to tithe. You don't have to get the car valuated and pay 10% of that for tzedakah. But let's say you don't need it, so you're going to be selling it. So if you're going to be selling the car, then you should be once you sell it, you should be giving 10% of the proceeds to tzedakah.
This comes into play, let's say, in inheritance, but if one parent gave the estate of one parent gave a building to one kid and gave cash money to another. So one ties and one doesn't?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Because they both came wealthier through this. They got something, but one
cash, one got liquid assets and one got real assets. So the laws of tzedakah only apply to liquid assets. They don't apply to real estate. That's the parent's decision, you know. So there's a benefit in getting liquid assets. You can do with it whatever you want. When you get real estate, you may have to sell it in order to liquidate it, you know. So, but once you sell it, you'd have to take 10% of whatever you earn in cash. V'yesh mi shepasak sheyesh la'aser mechafatzim v'nadlan shekibel b'matana o b'yerusha kasher yesh lo kesef acher sheyochol la'aser mimenu ba'avuram. There is such an opinion that says even with chattel and real estate, you should tithe if you have dispensable cash, if you have available cash that you can use for that purpose. But if you don't have that money, you're not obligated to borrow or to sell off assets in order to tithe. That seems to be quite an extreme position. That's from Kol HaTorah, from the name of Reb Shlomo Zalman. That's quite interesting. Okay. Daled. Misha kana binyan va'binyan hityaker. A person purchases a building. The building appreciates in value. Im nehene befoal me hityakrut binyan. He says, if you actually benefit from the appreciation of the building, kagon shal yedei zeh mekabel halva'a gedola. b'socher b'sikumim yoter gedolim v'naseh lo b'hem revachim, such as through the appreciation of the real estate, you're able to take out loans of a higher value, or you're able to rent out the building for higher rental rates. Yesh mi sheposek shechayv la'aser et erech hityakrut habinyan la'achar shehechzir et hahalva afilu lifnei shemachar et habinyan. Some say that you'd be obligated to tithe the appreciation. In other words, if the building's gone up a certain percentage, tithe, take 10% from that appreciation amount, since you're actually benefiting from that. But, and that would be true even before you sell the building. V'yesh mi shecholek, and the others disagree. The sover shalamrot sheyesh lo revach me hityakrut habinyan, mikol makom ein la'aser et erech hityakrut habinyan kol od shelo machar oto. Some say no, you only have to tithe once you sell the building, and whatever the difference between the purchase and the sale, profit is what you should tithe. Because we only have to tithe liquid assets, not we don't have to tithe non-liquid assets. And as we understand, the person should always tithe whatever profits he gets from, let's say, the sale of a building after you've paid off the mortgage and so forth. Okay. Mi shegar be'eretz Yisrael, tzarich latet ma'aser me'revach she'herviach me'aliyat sha'ar hadolar. If, let's say, someone lives in Eretz Yisrael, he would have to tithe whatever profits he gets from a, let's say, the appreciation of the dollar. And and I suppose what he's talking about is if a person's a money trader, a currency trader, and he deals in dollars, and the price of the dollar goes up, so he ends up making more money. He would have to tithe from that appreciation, provided that the shekel does not depreciate from the appreciation of the dollar. Hainu shelo ala mechir rov hadvarim hanechutzim livnei adam, meaning that the prices in Israel have not gone up. It's just that the dollars that he has have appreciated in value. It's a little bit hard for me to understand. See, he writes in the footnotes, he says, he says, sometimes the dollar fluctuates and goes up very rapidly, and then just as rapidly it diminishes in value. And that has no effect on the economy in Israel. Those prices remain the same. So if a person is a currency trader and he makes a profit off that during that small period of time when the dollar went up in value, he sells off his dollars, so he'd have to take meiser from the profits. And this also is the subject of debate, whether or not you'd have to tithe that. Okay, next. Yesh poskim.
You're making a profit on that security. Let's say the stock jumps up 20% one day, you want to just sell it.
Yeah. You sell a stock, you bought it at 100 and now you sell it at 150. So whatever profit you've made, you should tithe. Yeah.
But really, people don't work that way. Most people, I imagine, look at where you the whole package of them.
Right. Well, yeah, you're supposed to look at whatever liquid profits you incurred over the year. If, let's say, you haven't sold your stocks, you don't have to tithe, right? It's only when you actually sell the stock and you have cash in pocket as a result that you would have to tithe that profit.
Right, okay, that's fine. You can do it in a year or two, right?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
could the currency trader do the same thing?
Sure. Yeah. Yesh poskim shahanosim kesef la'adam liknot davar mesuyam. Eno makpid kol kach im hamekabel yafrish ktsat lema'aser. V'lachein chayav hamekabel lahafrish ma'aser mima shekibel. Some people, some poskim say that if I give my friend cash to buy, let's say, groceries, I mind if you use some of it for other purposes. In which case, if I'm giving my friend $100, let's say I like him, I want him to, I know that his budget is tight. I give one of my kids $100. I say, buy yourself groceries with this. And because of the fact that our relationship is such that I don't care whether he uses all 100 for groceries or not, in that case, my son would have to tithe that $100 before buying the groceries, because I've given him a gift that is just cash, and therefore, it's not allocated specifically for goods. But if by the recipient's tithing, he will lack sufficient funds to buy what was given to him. In other words, let's say my dad says, buy yourself a roast for Shabbos, and a roast is $100. And if I tithe the $100 that he gave me, I'll only have $90, and I won't be able to afford a roast. So in that situation, ve'en lo kesef acher latet mimenu maaser al ma shekibel, and I don't have other funds with which I can tithe. Yirshom la'atzmo hamaaser kechov u'cheshuyuchal yifra. Write down as some, take the $100, buy the roast, and then not remind yourself that you owe $10 for tzedakah. That's one opinion. But if the stipulation when the person gave me the money was, buy yourself a roast with this $100 and give me the change, because if it only costs you $80 for the roast, give me back $20. So it's clear when the person gives me the money that I'm just a proxy to buy a specific item. So then I'm exempt from taking Meiser in that situation, because really the money doesn't belong to me to do with as I please. It's specifically for a specific item, and I'm not subject to tithing. And some say that in general, you're completely exempt, and this is what Rav Elyashiv paskind, that you're completely exempt from tithing when someone gives you money for a specific reason. That's the Kabbalah that I have, is that, a parent gives a child money and he says, all right, so you're making a wedding. You give your son, let's say, a couple $1,000, and you say, okay, hire the band. So your son has no obligation of Meiser on that $2,000 or whatever, $5,000, whatever it's going to cost to hire the band or the DJ, because you've given it to him for a specific expenditure, and he doesn't therefore have the right to do with the money as he pleases, right? It's given to him specifically for hiring the band. Exactly.
Opposed to the whole.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. I would agree.
I would do that. Yeah, that's a good point.
I would agree. Well, even if you say this is for the overall wedding expenses, that could also be enough to say that you're exempt from tithing, because I'm giving you this money only to spend on your wedding. I don't want you to. I'm telling you, I want you only to purchase the things you need for the wedding and also for your household whatever you have the change for, purchase household necessities. Okay? So in that kind of scenario, you've specified what you want the money to be designated for. Anytime you specify, right? I've gotten gifts before. I remember Karen's aunt would give me, she'd say, I'm giving you $50. I want you to buy yourself a nice shirt, right? That's what she did. That was her thing. Okay, her blessed memory, right? So, what if the shirt was only $45 because it was on sale, right? So does that mean that I have to tithe it? No. She said specifically, I want you to buy this is money I want you earmarked to buy yourself a shirt. I'm not obligated to tithe the remainder. She wants me to have it specifically for a shirt. Okay. Zion. Misha kibel kesef kidei liknot bo davar mesuyam. V'hanotein amar lo beferu sheino notno elo litzorach oto hadavar bilvad. Ein hamekabel rashai latei mimenu maaser. This is sort of like a reinforcement that if a person receives monies to purchase a specific item, like my aunt giving me the money for the shirt, and the giver says, I'm only giving you this money for that purpose, to buy yourself a shirt. So the recipient isn't even allowed to tie that. He can't say, you know what, I'll give, my aunt gave me $50. I'll give 5 to tzedakah and I'll buy a $45 shirt. No, you're not allowed to do that. Not allowed to. And it's even if I find a $50 shirt on sale for $45, I'm still not allowed to tie. I mean, I can give if I want to. I can give the extra $5 to tzedakah, but I'm not allowed to lechatchila go ahead and tithe it and then have less money. Kimochein bachur sha'aviv doresh mimenu litzamtzem bahotzaot. Let's say you have a boy, a young man, a single man, and his father tells him, I need you to cut down on your spending, right? Because the father's is supporting the son, okay? I'm giving you a stipend, son. I'm giving you $1,000 a month, and I'm only, you need to cut down on your expenses because this is all you're going to have from me. I only want you to spend it on your living expenses. And the kid says, Dad, can I use some of it for tzedakah? The father says, no, I'm giving you tzedakah. I don't want you to use it for tzedakah for others. I want you to use it for yourself. So in that situation, lo yitain ma'aser, the recipient, the son, does not even have permission to tithe that money. She'eno chayav latet ma'aser ba'ofen kazeh. The son does not have any obligation to tithe in that scenario. It's clear that he's receiving a stipend specifically for his own living expenses, and the giver has made it quite clear that he should not use it for tzedakah. Okay. Now, Tess. Av hamishalem schar dira bishvil bino. If a father is paying rent for his son, the son would have to tithe whatever he was receiving for his father in consideration of the father paying rent. In other words, if every month the father pays the kid's rent, it's $2,000 a month. Okay, so the son would have to look at it this way. It's as if my father's giving me $2,000 a month as a stipend, but he hasn't stipulated that it's explicitly that it's only for me and not to be used for any other purpose. So really, I have to tithe $200 from that $2,000 because my father's giving it to me for personal use. Which is, in other words, my father's alleviating what I would normally have to pay from my own pocket. So therefore, it's as if I've profited $2,000 from my father's kindness. And some hold that that's not the halacha. Some hold that you don't have to tithe from money that you didn't see directly, that didn't come into your pocket directly, but just money that you saved because someone else paid your bills for you.
If I'm going to get stuck on, I'm going to give it on my own. I don't have to give to you so that you can give it, unless you want to, a little bit or whatever. But I'd rather, if I was giving my son money for rent, I'd rather that I give my own stucca and I just want you to take the money for the rent. So once again, father stipulates that this money should only be for rent.
Well, no, look, I think it's more prevalent. Let's say you have a situation where the father owns the building, or the father, let's say, has a special business relationship with the owner of the building. The father negotiates with the owner and says, listen, I'm going to be paying the rent, give me a special deal. So the son never sees the money. It's not that the son is poor. The son has the ability to pay the rent himself, but he's getting it at a discount because his father is paying it for him. In that situation, the argument is, why should the son be exempt from Meiser? It's as if he's getting a $2,000 gift every month, right? But others say that you don't have to, that you're not obligated. We don't look at it as any money that you've saved through someone else's payment to a third-party creditor is like the money came into your pocket. Misha ochel bechinam lechol hadeot eino chayav latet ma'aser mima shechasach. So let's say you're eating for free, you get free food. Because let's say your parents own a bakery or they own a restaurant, and at the end of the week or at the end of the day, they tell you to come by, pick up the food, and feed your family. So do you have to tithe from the VAT? In other words, you're getting free goods. That saves you money that you would normally be spending on groceries. Do you have to tithe that? So he says everyone agrees that you don't have to. When it comes to food, everyone agrees that you don't have to tithe what you saved but never came into your pocket as cash. If a father gives his son who's studying in yeshiva, and he says, here, son, you're getting married, or son is going to school, doesn't have to be dafke yeshiva. He says, son, you're in school, you're going to buy yourself or going to rent yourself an apartment, or you're going to pay for the wedding. So the father gives the son, and he tells him explicitly it's for this purpose. Ein ha'av sarich lahafrish ma'aser me'asikum hazeh. So the father doesn't have to tithe the money that he's giving away to his son. Ki kol hasikum hazeh hu litzdaka shenosein livno, because that money is considered tzedakah. If I give my son a stipend to pay for his wedding or to pay for his lodging, I'm giving my son tzedakah. The father should just give a small amount to the poor from whatever he's giving to his son, but not literally from that amount, but keeping in mind, look, I have a certain amount of profits that much of that profit is going to my son, but I'll still give a small amount to tzedakah nonetheless.
People will give for whatever reason, let's say a really special 21-year-old Macallan or a special scotch, which is worth hundreds of dollars, right? So does that fall into the same category?
Well, yeah, you're exempt from tithing it unless you're actually using it as a tradable commodity. Once you sell, if you give me a $300 bottle, and I say I'm not a big drinker, I'll sell this on the open market. When I sell it, I have to tithe it, but not before. Okay, we'll hold it.